What is conformity effect? How does it influence our decision making? Conformity effect describes people's tendency to defer to the majority view and the social norms, even when they are blatantly false. In Solomon Asch experiment, a group of participants determined which line was the same length as line A. The correct answer is C. However, when all the Confederates purposely provided an inaccurate answer, stating that line D was the same length as A, the real participants in the experiment often abandoned their own initial judgment and conformed to the false consensus. About 75% of the real participants conformed at least once during the experiment, agreeing with the clearly incorrect majority answer. The question arises, why do people conform their correct judgment to the group's incorrect one? The primary driving force behind this behavior is the deep desire for social approval. People are often motivated to fit in, avoid standing out, and seek assistance from others, which can lead them to abandon their own judgment in favor of the group consensus. Human beings, wired for social connections, have a strong desire to align with majority viewpoints and social norms. This innate desire is often seen as a desire to be accepted within our social circles, to fit in. Adherence to social norms is strengthened not only by the approval of the majority, but also the penalties meted out by groups when those norms are breached. A violation can evoke feelings of embarrassment, guilt, and anxiety, acting as a powerful deterrent against dissent. The path of least resistance often lies in going with the flow, aligning our views with those of trusted peers and people who share our social identities. Not only simplifies decision-making, but also triggers intense activities in our brain's dopaminergic system. This activation makes us feel gratified, a feeling similar to the pleasure we derive from a delicious meal or a heartwarming movie. However, standing firm in disagreement with the majority can weigh heavy on our emotional state. Imagine holding a minority viewpoint in a heated debate. The mere act of standing your ground and articulating your dissent can provoke anxiety reflected in heightened activity in brain regions such as the insula, right amygdala, and the right caudate nucleus. Those are areas associated with processing emotions, particularly those linked to stress and discomfort. Moreover, rejecting widely accepted views and social norms can pose a threat to our basic psychological needs. Our desire for social affiliation can cause a sense of emotional distress. When we feel ostracized from the group we wish to belong to, this emotional pain, similar to a sensation of being socially wounded, activates the same brain regions that lights up when we experience physical pain. Holding a minority view can also often trigger feelings of diminished control. If you're the only supporters of a less popular political candidate in a community, you may feel like your vote bears no weight against the tide of the majority opinion. Even if you eventually conform to the majority view, your brain makes a vivid record of the initial disagreement. The superior parietal cortex, as a part of your memory system, encodes the initial disagreement better than an agreement. This stored memory of the initial disagreement could be retrieved in the future, potentially influencing your long-term decision-making. Resisting conformity and charting one's course is possible, but it takes additional mental effort. When you stand alone at a crossroads and everyone else takes a well-trodden path, to resist the temptation to the familiar route and venture into the unknown and chart out your own path requires significant mental effort. Remember, our brains consume a lot of energy, thereby operating on the principle of energy efficiency. This is why it's easier to go with the flow than sailing against the current. Even though it's often healthier not to succumb to the herd mentality, it undeniably takes a significant mental toll to remain a dissenter and break away from the gravitational pull of conformity. Children can begin to demonstrate the conformity effect at a relatively young age. Around the age of 3 to 4, children start to become more aware of their social surroundings and the expectations of their immediate social group, which often includes family, friends, and caregivers. They begin to observe and imitate behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of those around them as they seek to understand and navigate their social world. During this stage, children may exhibit a strong desire to fit in, gain approval, and avoid conflict or rejection. They are motivated to align themselves with their peers or authority figures, conforming to the group's norms and expectations. They may adopt similar preferences, opinions, or behaviors in order to feel accepted and valued. As the children grow older and enter adolescence, the influence of peer groups becomes particularly significant. During this period, conformity tendencies can intensify as teenagers strive to establish their identity, gain acceptance, and navigate complex social dynamics. People's conformity tendencies continue to evolve throughout life as they interact with different social groups and encounter different social contexts. The impact of conformity effect is important in shaping social norms that hold people together in shared understanding. When our behaviors align with established group behaviors, we are perceived as a member of the group. Any deviation from the norm often brands you as a renegade, drawing into question your allegiance and commitment to the group. Think of a professional environment. Dressing professionally, respecting the chain of command, and adhering to the organization's core values can secure our acceptance within the organization. However, choosing to openly criticize the management could isolate us from our colleagues and potentially impact our professional advancement. On one hand, the conformity effect is a powerful tool that can make group decision-making efficient. Mimicking others' behaviors is a practical strategy to create social rapport and cohesion. Conformity proves especially beneficial in ambiguous situations, serving as a compass guiding our decisions based on others' actions. Imagine landing in a foreign country with an unfamiliar language and culture. The safest way to navigate through the initial confusion would be to closely observe and replicate the behavior of the locals. Policymakers often use this human tendency toward conformity to initiate social change. Small shifts in public opinion can snowball into a cascade of transformation. Consider smoking in public places. A few decades ago, it was socially acceptable, but with the growth of awareness about its health hazards, attitudes have shifted. Laws banning smoking in public areas were implemented, and the social pressure grew against the practice. However, conformity can sometimes lead to flawed decisions. Conformity demands challenging popular yet blatantly wrong ideas. Ideally, we'd like to believe we have integrity and would resist any group pressure pushing us towards blatantly wrong ideas. However, when our personal perceptions collide with the social reality, we're often more prone to conform to the group norms than to stand by our views. Conformity can lead to the homogenization of perspectives and behaviors, stifling individual creativity and critical thinking. A primary function of an organization is to enforce the conformity of organizational members to norms, which are collectively shaped by organizational members. Your vulnerability to the conformity effect is largely influenced by your standing within an organizational hierarchy. Look at this organizational chart. Who is most susceptible to the conformity effect? In organizations, there is a middle status conformity effect. Bill, who frequently dismisses new ideas, is particularly vulnerable to this effect. If you find yourself at the top of the organizational chart, like Abby, you are often driven to break away from norms shaped by those lower in the hierarchy. If, however, you stand at the lowest rung of the organizational chart, deviation from social norms comes with minimal risk. It is those in the middle, like Bill, who are particularly susceptible to the conformity effect and go with the majority viewpoint. If you were in Bill's shoes, would you have the nerve to call out Abby, your supervisor, on her flawed decisions when everyone else showers her with praises? One researcher said the real opposite of inclusion is not exclusion, it's conformity. Inclusion is about recognizing unique identities, thoughts, and perspectives of people. It encourages diversity and creates a culture where everyone is free to be their authentic selves without fear of judgment. True inclusion invites a broad range of ideas, stimulates creativity, and drives innovation. Conformity, on the other hand, encourages uniformity and similarity. It tends to suppress individuality and uniqueness in favor of adhering to a set of predefined norms or standards. In the name of conformity, people may feel compelled to suppress their unique traits and views to blend into the group or organization, creating a homogeneous environment. Consider a multinational organization that employs people from different cultural, racial, and gender backgrounds. True inclusion would mean each individual, regardless of their background, feels valued and their ideas are considered. They can freely express their cultural and personal identity without fear of judgment or exclusion. Their unique perspectives and experiences contribute to a richer understanding of challenges and potential solutions. However, if the organization's culture promotes conformity, those diverse organizational members feel the need to suppress their unique viewpoints and cultural practices to fit in. One employee who holds a minority view may feel compelled to adopt a dominant view, thereby masking their unique insights and perspectives that could otherwise contribute to better decision-making. As a result, while on the surface it may seem like the organization is diverse, a culture of conformity undermines the inclusion. During group decision-making, the majority tends to rule. However, a popular choice does not necessarily mean it's the correct one. The words of American poet and philosopher Chris Janey ring true here. But what good is the popular opinion if the lot of us just process like minions? Dissenting opinions hold intrinsic value regardless of their validity, a fact recognized by the framers of the U.S. Constitution, who enshrined free speech as a constitutional right, safeguarding against the potential tyrannies of governing majority. In fact, evidence indicates that dissenting views enrich the quality of group decision-making by increasing thoughtfulness and creativity. The truth remains unchanged regardless of popularity. In science, the majority opinion is not necessarily closer to the truth. Great scientists have often been those who dared to stray away from the majority view. In the early 20th century, Newtonian physics was the accepted paradigm for understanding the physical world. However, Einstein's theory of relativity, with its concepts of space-time and the speed of light being the ultimate speed limit, challenged this. Einstein's theory was initially met with skepticism, but it was ultimately accepted and has reshaped our understanding of the universe. Looking forward, it's possible that some of our current beliefs will be debunked in the future. Consider our understanding of consciousness, which is still very rudimentary. Future research could completely change our understanding of what consciousness is and how it arises. Choosing to resist conformity can be a mentally demanding task, as it requires us to swim against the current, to challenge the herd mentality. So how can we effectively counter this tendency towards conformity? First, it's important to build a strong, rich knowledge base. When we're faced with a dominant viewpoint backed by the majority, it's natural to feel pressured to comply unless we are confident in our own expertise and have robust evidence to back up our stance. Having a deep understanding of a subject matter in question provides intellectual ammunition needed to confidently voice and defend our stance. Consider a scenario where a team in an organization is discussing the adoption of a new technology platform. If you, being an expert in that particular technology, understands its downsides and limitations that others are overlooking, you would be better positioned to voice your dissent and provide a well-reasoned argument for your perspective. You would be less likely to simply go along with the majority view. However, if you are not an expert in the topic at hand, or if you are unsure about where you stand on the issue, the natural tendency is to lean on the judgments and opinions of others. You default to use the majority viewpoint as a mental shortcut, leading you to adopt the majority view as your own. So the next time you are in a meeting and the chairperson proudly announces a unanimous or majority-backed decision, keep in mind that this consensus does not necessarily indicate decision quality. The decision quality is irrelevant to the number of people who support it. Remember, the most critical voice could be the one that disagrees, offering a fresh perspective that propels everyone toward a more enlightened and potentially innovative solution. This brings us to the second approach to countering conformity effect in group decision-making. It is beneficial to purposely introduce divergent viewpoints. In Ash's experiment, finding even one supportive peer dramatically reduced errors in decision, and the resistance to conformity persisted even after the supportive peer was no longer physically present. There is an enduring power of mental solidarity against the conformity effect. In U.S. jury trials, the presence of even one single dissenting juror can result in a hung jury, effectively swaying the majority decision. The movie 12 Angry Men illustrates this effect. Philip Zimbardo, a psychologist, suggests that dissenters can change the tide of group opinion if they have 4 qualities: maintaining a consistent stance, displaying confidence, refraining from rigid dogmatism, and accumulating social influence. Start observing your decision-making process and those of others around you. See if you can spot instances of conformity effect. Please feel free to share your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.